Hi guys, how are we doing tonight? So, tonight is my first night using my stream deck, so this is a fun experience. Okay, so tonight, let's see here. Let me fix my mic here. Hang on. Sorry. Hang on. Okay, anywho, so we are back to the beginning. We are actually on the second Mercenaries book, or intro book, should I say, of Ben Wolf's Blood Mercenaries Origins. You can go to my YouTube and catch up on all the previous channels there, or the previous chapters, excuse me. YouTube is in the chat, courtesy of the stream deck. Let's go. That's so convenient. Okay. So this next book is called Etheridge. I'll have to double check with Ben here and see how that one's pronounced too. Chapter 1. Electric energy tingled in the tips of Kent Etheridge's fingers. He clenched his fists to subdue the sensation. Father is waiting, Kent said from his brother Fane's side. I do not know why you insist on delaying. It is not my intention to keep him waiting, nor do I wish to vex you, brother, Fane countered, and I would prefer if you didn't hover over my shoulder. I am perfectly capable of dressing myself. Kent scoffed, with the aid of no fewer than 3 of our servants. Fine. I'm heading downstairs. At least one of us should be punctual. Then just wait one more minute, and I will be ready. Fane shifted his stance. Give me just a second here. Sorry. Fane shifted his stance so the servants could secure his long green cape to the triangle-shaped fasteners attached to his jacket. Kent frowned. His younger brother's vanity had irked him for decades, but over the last several weeks, Fane had developed an even more demanding demeanor. It frustrated Kent beyond what words could describe. The tingling in Kent's hands persisted, and he kept his fists clenched. He needed to get out of there and regain control of himself before Fane noticed. No, Fane, Kent said. I am leaving now. The succession ceremony is not dependent on your attendance. As Kent turned and headed out of the door, Fane spoke again. Kent, your selfishness is the one thing about you I do not covet. Ken didn't turn around, but said, and thanks to your recklessness, your carelessness, and your flippancy, there is nothing about you worth coveting. That ought to be enough to silence him. Where his brother was concerned, stern and decisive words proved most effective in reminding him of his place. Hearing no reply, Kent continued out of Fane's chambers. Breathe, Kent. Thinking about his brother's insolence intensified the tingling in his fingertips again, even though his fists remained clenched. As he headed for the grand staircase that swooped down to the man's tower's floors, he noticed his fists giving off a faint blue glow. Ooh. Kent cursed and tucked them under his armpits. He abandoned his trek down the stairs a floor early and receded into the shadows behind a marble support pillar near a wall paneled with dark wood. But the blue glow from his fists was even more noticeable there. Breathe, Kent. Control yourself. But how do I control that which I cannot control? Others have learned to control it, and they are our sworn enemies, cursed and damned, like you. Just breathe. That is all you can do. Kent breathed. His pounding heartbeat slowed, and his stress dwindled again. He checked his hands. The blue glow had vanished, and the electric sensation no longer teased his fingertips. Why the gods had seen fit to curse him, of all people, with the scourge of magic, he didn't know, but he marveled at the irony yet again. He straightened his red waistcoat and checked his own cape, also red, and then he headed out of the shadows and toward the staircase. Thane met him there. For all your posturing, you are now as tardy as I am. Kent's jaw tightened, but he refused to let Thane damage his calm. I elected to wait for you out of my deep sense of magnanimity. You may thank me whenever you are ready. They proceeded down the remainder of the grand staircase together. Thane said, In that case, I will thank you when I have succeeded, father, in your place as the lord of the house Etheridge. In other words, Fane would never thank him unless Kent was dead and had failed to remarry and produce an heir. Fane's words didn't quite amount to a blatant wish for Ken's death, but they came treacherously close. Now, on the first floor, they headed into a large gathering hall adorned with dark wood paneling and bronze candelabras affixed to the walls. A hearth at the far end glowed with vivid orange flames. A painting of the late Lady Etheridge, Kent and Fane's mother, hung from the stones overhead. In recent years, Kent's dark hair had begun to gray, matching the silver locks depicted in his mother's portrait, though Fane's had not yet started to lose its color. They both shared their mother's bright blue eyes. Morning sunlight poured into the room through towering, arched windows paned with glass. It glinted off of the gold-colored flecks in the room's white and black marble floors. Their father, Lord Oswin Etheridge, sat in an overstuffed leather chair facing them as they entered the room together. He looked frailer than he had just the night before. He was wise to plan the succession early. Kent, now at 48 years old, had handled their family's affairs for the last 3 years almost exclusively, so it made sense for father to name him Lord Etheridge once and for all. They approached their father at a casual pace, and he grinned and motioned to the two servants standing next to his chair, one on each side. They hooked their arms under his armpits and gently pulled him upright until he could stand, albeit slightly hunched over. One of the servants handed him his cane, a twisted wooden stick polished to a high shine and topped with a bronze griffin, the very symbol of House Etheridge. He leaned on it for stability while he addressed his sons. Kent, Fane, good morning. Kent nodded to father, and he and Fane echoed father's greeting in unison. Father's gaze fixed on Kent. Are you ready, my son? Kent nodded. Father, before we proceed, Fane stepped forward. I would like the opportunity to speak. Wonderful. What could it be now? Fane, Kane, Kent began, his voice stern. You always have something to say. There will be ample time to speak after the ceremony concludes. Your cunning tongue strikes again, dear brother, Fane quipped. But what I have to say must be said before the ceremony proceeds. Kent stood his ground. Whatever it is, it can wait. It cannot. I must be indulged. I have indulged you your entire life. Nonsense. You have merely tolerated me, as one does when dealing with a nuisance. Kent cut back. Fane shook his head. Such a loving response from my dear brother. And soon to be your lord, Kent countered. Know your place. The familiar tingle returned to Kent's fingertips. No, not now. Fight it. Be in control. Kent clenched his hands into fists again. Father, Fane looked at him, and Kent did as well. Father turned to his two servants, the only other people in the room. Leave us. I love you too, baby. They obeyed immediately and shut the room's heavy wooden doors behind them, joining the man's other servants and guards in awaiting further orders. Father exhaled a long breath through his nose, and then he straightened up as much as he could manage. Fane, it is most irregular that you would ask to speak before a ceremony so important to me, to your brother, and to our family. Father, please, Fane nearly pleaded. Let him speak, Fane, Kent growled. Father held up a withered hand and then quickly returned it to his two-handed grip on the cane to stabilize himself. If Kent will grant you the opportunity to speak, then I, too, will allow it. But know that whatever you might say will not affect my decision to pass on my title preemptively. Kent eyed Fane. Whatever he has to say, it won't be anything good. Hang on, guys. I am going to go grab a drink. I will be right back. Okay, I'm back. Ooh, I should put the pokey catch command on a button. Yeah. Fane scowled at father. Then he turned to Kent, still scowling, but expectant. The decision was easy. Kent stared daggers at him. I do not grant you the right to speak prior to the ceremony. This is outrageous, Fane muttered. As I said, know your place, little brother, Kent snapped. Fane shook his head. No, I refuse to remain silent. Father held up his hand again. Fane, you must yield to. Father, please forgive my interruption. This must be said. Your oldest son is a traitor to our family name. Kent gawked at Fane, and Father glanced between the two of them. That is utterly absurd. The tingling in Kent's fingers intensified. He had to rein it all in. I have been nothing but totally loyal, diligent, and relentless in protecting and expanding our family's name and holdings since the day I came of age. Father, you know this to be true. This is a serious allegation, Father said. I know your dedication is beyond reproach, yet I must know why your own brother would make this accusation. Because he is an envious, treacherous leech who has always wanted that which he cannot have. The right of the firstborn, Kent said. I will gladly expound, Father, Fane said. No, Kent nearly shouted. There is nothing to expound upon. Father, I have never given you any reason to doubt my commitment and loyalty. You personally trained me and guided me and taught me how to care for our holdings and reputation over the last 35 years. This family means everything to me. I would never do anything to jeopardize us. Fane started again. Father, if I may. No, you may not, Kent pointed at him. Then he quickly pulled his hand back to his side. The tingling had spread to his entire hand. This cannot be happening. I must regain control. But how? Kent could storm out, perhaps. But while that would serve to conceal his secret, it would show a measure of weakness and instability. His father was ready to pass his title on to Kent, and now that Fane had sown a measure of doubt into the process, Ken didn't want to foster its growth any further. No, Ken needed to stay and fight for what was rightfully his. He worked to still his breathing and to quell the flux of magic in his fingers. Fane, Father said, the accusation you are bringing against your brother is the utmost seriousness. Without evidence, it appears as though you merely desire to usurp him and claim his place as Lord Etheridge. Your aspirations to my title are well known to many, not least of all your brother and me. Father, I would not make such a claim without absolute certainty. Fane stepped closer to Father, and it irked Kent all the more. I am not trying to usurp his claim. I'm trying to protect this family. This is a blatant lie. From the influence of our enemies hold no sway over me whatsoever. Kent moved his hands behind his back, hidden carefully by his cape. He couldn't be certain, but at the level of tingling they'd reached, they would likely begin to glow soon, if they weren't already. And those who seek to do us harm. He is conjuring false rumors without any proof, Kent said. He is and always has been a jealous little boy. He has always opposed me, and now, on the most important day of my life, he opposes me yet again. Father shook his head. I know all of this, but I cannot allow an accusation of this magnitude to go untested and unanswered. The truth must be known before we proceed, one way or another. I have told you the truth, Kent replied. I have never done anything to adversely affect our family. He has yet to share any evidence to the contrary. You want proof? Fane gave Kent a wicked grin and looked at Kent's waist. Or perhaps at his hands, hidden under his cape. It is in this very room. Kent swallowed. Impossible. I've hidden the curse so well. From everyone. No one knows. How could he possibly? Show us your hands, dear brother. Fane's eyebrows arched down, but his wicked grin remained. He knew. Kent didn't know how, but somehow Fane knew. He'd found out about Kent's magical affliction and now meant to use it against him. What do his hands have to do with anything? Father asked. Even the smallest child in Marath knows that our fair country has been at war with the wicked Enoth for 100 years, Fane said, and House Etheridge has long since defended Marath's southern border against Enothian incursions. Their use of magic is an abomination, a curse from the gods, which is why such practices are forbidden here. Anyone caught practicing magic of any kind in Marath is subject to judgment and ultimately execution. Kent swallowed again. Fane had the advantage now, without question. Father leaned forward. What do Kent's hands have to do with any of this? If he would only show them to us, I will explain. Fane turned towards Kent. Kent looked at Father. This is preposterous. Please, Kent, Father said more than asked. Show us your hands. Kent steeled himself, clenched his fists hard, and inhaled a long, shaky breath. He now regretted not having stormed out when he'd had the chance. But he complied, slowly pulling his tingling hands from behind his back and holding them, palms up, towards his father and Fane. They weren't glowing. Kent exhaled a silent sigh. What have you to say now, brother? Fane grinned that same wicked grin again. I do not need to say anything else. Instead, I will show you. Fane pulled a green crystal from within his coat and placed it in Kent's open palms. Then Kent's hands ignited with blue flames. What the fuck? So that's the end of chapter 1. That is I didn't whoa. Okay. So magic is banned and Fane's about to take his brother off the throne. Sounds like. Let's see what happens. Chapter 2. Kent dropped the crystal to the floor and recoiled, but painless blue fire still enveloped his hands. How had he not seen that coming? The crystal was scorelite, a type of mineral Marathians used to identify Enothian mages. His own men, soldiers who guarded the border and interrogated those to His own men, soldiers who guarded the border and interrogated those trying to pass into Marathian lands, used scorelite crystals to identify those cursed with magic. And Fane had set one in Kent's hand. Such a simple tactic, yet profoundly effective. Your eldest son is cursed, father, Fane said. Kent closed his eyes and willed the flames to depart and the tingling to subside. His concentration paid off as both diminished to nothing. Father gasped. By the gods! Father, allow me to explain, Kent said. There is no explaining this, Fane countered. He squared himself with Kent and stared at him with cold blue eyes. You are anathema to our people, cursed and eternally damned. As such, you may not succeed our father as Lord Etheridge, and you are condemned to die. Wait, Fane, Father said. Fane turned back. Father, you know the law. You've been enforcing it for 3/4 of a century. Fane, stand down, Father ordered. I will speak with my son, and you will remain silent. Fane stepped aside in silence, but his triumphant expression did not change. Kent started to speak. Father, Be silent, Ken. Father didn't say it loudly, but he said it firmly. I will speak, and you will listen. There will be no explanations, no excuses. You will only speak if I grant you permission to do so. Do you understand? Kent's insides shuddered, but he stood tall and nodded. You are my eldest son. You are the successor to my title, my lands, and my responsibilities. Father? Fane stared at him in disbelief. Quiet, Fane, Father snapped. I will not warn you again. A sliver of hope parted the dismay in Kent's gut. Kent, you are what you are, and I cannot change that. No one can, unless the gods see fit to emerge from their realms to remove this curse from you. Tears welled in Kent's eyes. He believed in the gods as much as the next Marathian, but he knew they'd never care enough for the affairs of men to intervene in such a way. Regrettably, your brother is right. The law is the law, and I must enforce it. In my role as a lord of the realm of Murath, Father's old blue eyes met Kent's once more. As such, I strip from you all of the rights and privileges associated with your name, as I strip the name Etheridge itself from you. Father, no, Kent begged. And I hereby banish you, from all of Murath under penalty of death. Kent gasped. Everything he'd done over the last 35 years, every preparation he'd applied, every scrap of education and training he'd received, every sacrifice he'd made, every risk he'd taken, none of it mattered anymore. None of it could ransom him from his fate. Banishment? Fane spat. You are merely banishing him? Kent and Father looked towards Fane. The Marathian penalty for being a magic user is death, and death alone. He must be executed. You have seen the proof with your own eyes. Kent's fingers began to tingle again. He clenched his fists to stave it off. Things were already bad enough. And as Lord of House Etheridge and protector of our southern borders, I am granting him the only mercy I can. Father fired back. Your brother may no longer call himself an Etheridge, nor may he reside in this realm. but I refuse to execute him. Then you refuse to see that Marathian justice is served, Fane shouted. Control yourself, Fane. Father pointed a gnarled finger at him. I am Marathian justice in this province. Or have you forgotten your studies? Fane hissed. You are nothing but an old man who lacks the resolve to do what must be done. How dare you? Father growled. Your impudence is reprehensible. Your talk is bordering on treason. Be silent, for I do not wish to lose 2 sons today. Fane shook his head and glowered at Father. You already have. Sorry, guys, I had to switch my mics really quick. The silver glint of a dagger flashed into Fane's hand, and then it disappeared again, driven through Father's chest. Kent recoiled in horror. No! Father gasped, staggered back a half step, and clutched at his chest. Fane released his grip on the dagger, and Father slumped into the leather chair near the hearth, wheezing with wide, sunken eyes and covered in blood. Well, goddamn. Father, no! Kent shoved past Fane and rushed to Father's side. For magic being a curse, he'd seen and heard of its extraordinary properties, not the least of which was its ability to mend broken bones, torn flesh, and even brutal wounds. But Kent had no knowledge of such uses. His entire life, he'd been taught to hate magic and to oppress, kill, or report anyone found using it. So he'd never learn anything about how to use it. He had only fought to repress it within himself, to hide it. That didn't mean he couldn't try. Kent pressed his hands on either side of the dagger as his father stared up at him in shock and disbelief. Kent's hands ignited with blue light again, and he willed the magic flowing through him to somehow heal his father. Guards! Fane shouted from behind him. At that moment, Kent looked down at the dagger lodged in his father's chest. He recognized it. Father had given it to him 2 years prior as a gift for a victory Kent achieved in battle against an incursion of Enothian warriors, powerful magic users who threatened the Etheridge fortress in the southeastern quadrant of the province. The doors burst open, and 2 guards clad in bronze armor and wielding swords barreled inside. He murdered Lord Etheridge! Fane shouted. Damn! Fane had stabbed Father with Kent's own blade, and Kent was trying to use magic to save him. And now the guard's first impressions were of Kent standing over his dying father with glowing blue hands. It was a setup. A perfect setup. And suddenly, Fane's remark about thanking Kent only when he could instead succeed Father as Lord Etheridge made perfect sense. The guards rushed towards Kent. He was unarmed, but he'd faced two armed men many times before, and oftentimes more. It was never easy, but he knew how to prevail. He'd trained relentlessly for most of his life to overcome situations like this, and far worse. The first guard swung his sword laterally, and Kent stepped into his swing with his arms up. He blocked the guard's arms from moving forward and got a grip on it, then stepped across the guard's body, bent at his knees, and flipped the guard over his shoulder. The back piece of the guard's breastplate smacked hard on the marble floor, and Kent easily pulled the sword from his hand. He spun back and met the second guard blade with his own. Kent's hands still glowed with blue light, but blue flames no longer emanated from them. As he exchanged blows with the second guard, the glow continued to fade to nothing. The guard proved a proficient fighter, probably one of the more capable soldiers in the province. It made sense. Highly skilled soldiers were assigned to protect that which mattered most, the Etheridges themselves. But Kent was better. He parried a swing, stepped in, and drove his elbow into the soldier's face instead of simply running him through. He was, after all, just being a loyal soldier, and he didn't deserve to die for Fane's sins. The guard staggered back, but he didn't go down, so Kent stepped in again and planted his left foot behind the guard's right foot, and he shoved hard with his arms and pulled with his leg. The guard dropped back, and his helmet slammed against the marble floor. He wasn't moving. Kent whirled back towards the front guard, towards the Kent whirled back towards the first guard, who'd recovered but no longer held a weapon. Kent stared toward him, full of confidence and rage, while Fane looked on. Guards! Fane called again. More guards! The guard dove for Kent's knees, and Kent sprawled out to stop his advance. He used his body weight to smash the guard's helmet face first against the floor. Then he sprung to his feet and started toward Fane. But Fane was ready for him with a pair of long knives, one from each of his boots. The morning sunlight from the huge windows behind him lit up his green cape and his matching waistcoat and trousers. "You murdering bastard!" Kent growled. "I will kill you for this." "Not if we kill you first, you cursed scum." Fane's gaze flitted past Kent toward the doors, and the telltale clanking of metal and shuffling of leather-soled boots announced the approach of several more guards. Kent kept a safe distance between himself and Fane's knives and assessed his predicament. The room had one set of doors, seemingly the only exit. But any of the massive windows behind Fane could afford Kent a reasonable escape. Those options aside, only the chimney leading up from the fireplace remained, but with the fire burning in the hearth, Kent doubted his chances. An escape was the only option now. He wouldn't have time to kill Fane and the two unconscious guards he'd left on the floor before the rest of the guards arrived. They'd still accuse Kent of murdering father, and they'd kill him for being cursed once the other guards woke up and spoke of what they'd seen. Kent tried to reposition himself so as to get a better angle on approaching the windows, but Fane matched his movements, cutting him off from the easier escape. Like Kent, Fane had trained in the art of combat since childhood. Getting past him would come at a cost, either to one of them or perhaps to both of them. The guards appeared in the doorway and began filtering into the room and toward Fane and Kent. He murdered Lord Etheridge and used magic to dispose. Okay, wow. He murdered Lord Etheridge and used magic to dispatch those guards, Thane called to them. His dagger is in Lord Etheridge's chest. The guards wouldn't normally have trusted Fane's word over Kent's, but given the look of the room and the fact that Kent was holding one of the guards' swords, they didn't order. They didn't argue. Instead, they moved to encircle him. If Kent didn't go now, he'd be pushing past not just Fane, but also whatever guards would reach the windows in the next few precious seconds. So, he went for it. He charged Fane, his eyes keen on the blade in Fane's right hand, but aware of the one in his left as well. Fane braced himself and tensed, ready. Kent swung his sword, and Fane shifted under it, over to Kent's right side. Fane lashed his knife blade towards Kent's torso, but he no longer stood between Kent and the windows. Ken didn't stop his momentum. He swung the sword back the other way as he leapt out at the window. Fire lit up Kent's hip. His sword hit something on its backswing, and the glass shattered against the body as he plowed through it and onto the women's lawn. And onto the Mansies' lawn. Sorry. Somewhere behind them, Fane screamed. Kent hit the ground, rolled, and sprung up to his feet. Tears seared his hip, and he glanced down as he ran. He'd been cut, probably when Fane had sliced at him. A blade had carved through Kent's wool clothing, but he couldn't tell how deep the wound was. It hurt to run, but not enough to stop. His breath puffed out as a mist in the single winter air. What? His breath puffed out as mist in the cold winter air. Stately walls formed a sturdy perimeter around the Etheridge Manse, and more elite soldiers clad in bronze armor stood guard in watchtowers placed at strategic points. Getting through the gate would prove challenging, but not by any means impossible. None of these soldiers knew what had happened, or even that anything was happening. He ran across the lawn, jumped over flower beds, and dodged ornamental stones and trees until he reached the front gate. Hey, Panda! How are you? Yeah, it has been a while. How was the holidays? How were your holidays? The soldiers manning the gate stared at him in confusion, but he didn't care. Near the gate, one soldier was tending to a white horse with small, sporadic black spots. It was already saddled. At least something is going right today. Open the gate! Kent shouted as he ran. The soldiers looked at each other, but no one moved. Open the gate! Kent yelled again. Still, no action. One of them shouted back, We're under orders from your brother to keep it shut. I am overruling him. Kent winced as he ran. Every step spiked his hip, but he'd gained a substantial lead ahead of the guards who now inevitably pursued him. Even so, he didn't look back. My lord, another soldier looking him up and down. Are you bleeding? I'm fine, Kent snapped. Open the damned gate, or I'll have you all executed. The soldiers rushed to comply, and the gate inched open. You there, Kent pointed towards the soldiers tending the horse and tucked his sword in his belt without a sheath. It would have to do for now. I'm taking that horse. Yes, my lord. The soldier bowed and then stood by to steady the horse while Kent mounted it. Then he handed Kent the reins. Unintelligible shouts sounded from behind them, and Kent finally looked up back. Halfway to the man's, the bronze armor of about a dozen soldiers glinted under the sunlight. The soldiers looked up at him. My father has been murdered, Kent told them, and I am personally riding north to Lord Frostsong's estate to petition him for aid. My brother Fane is the culprit. My lord, said the soldier who'd helped him onto the horse, please allow me to gather a proper escort for your journey. Ken couldn't allow to bring any of them. Whoa. Ken couldn't allow any of them to come with. Based on the tingling in his hands, it was only a matter of time before his magical curse manifested again, and then he'd have to fight off more of his own soldiers. All he could do was flee. There is no time. I will be fine on my own. Kent checked into the gate, almost wide enough to fit the horse through. See that my brother is arrested for the murder of my father, and have him executed before I return. I can never return, but even if in, whoa, I can never return, even if that should happen. But they didn't need to know that. Okay, let's see here. Sorry, guys. Okay. There is no time. I will be fine on my own. Kent checked the gate, almost wide enough to fit the horse through. See that my brother is arrested for the murder of my father, and have him executed before I return. I can never return, even if that should happen. But they didn't need to know that. Yes, my lord, one of the soldiers said. The gate was close to being open wide enough. Ken urged the horse toward it. The shouts from behind him crystallized in his ears. Don't let him out! He killed Lord Etheridge! Someone yelled. Kent glanced back at the soldiers around the gate. They stared up at him as confused as they'd been when he'd come running. The pursuing guards shouted the same directive again, and the soldiers at the gate turned toward Kent. They were putting it all together, making sense of the scenario. Kent's injured hip, the sword in his belt. My lord, one of them said, you need to come down off that horse. Kent kicked the horse's sides and cracked the reins, and the horse bolted towards the gate. Close the gate! Someone behind him shouted. The gate stopped opening and started closing, but Kent was already close enough. The horse squirted between the gate The horse squirted between the gate doors and carried him into the expanse of hills and trees beyond. Oh, bro. Nice. Did you get any of these stuff that he out of the box? Alright, guys, that was a little break there. We will continue this one in the next few days, probably. This is wrapping up to be a good one. Well, starting up to be a good one. Um, yeah, interested to see what happens with Kent and his brother. I wonder if Fane is going to manage to get the crown or not. So we shall see. Let's find somebody here to raid. And then I can use my fancy stream deck and the buttons. Alright, who is Gunnery, Mom Saturn, French fries? Let's go pop into French fries. Um, he is a no cam no mic streamer, but he is so very active in his chat as far as typing goes. He normally plays D2 content, but it looks like right now he's playing some Call of Duty Warzone. Um, he is yeah, he also struggles with social anxiety and stuff. So me and him have kind of gotten some good talks in over the last year about some stuff. So yeah, let's go pop into French fries, see how he's doing tonight. Thank you guys for joining me. I will be live once again in a few days, and we'll go from there. Here are the raid commands here.